Welcome to the Are We Idiots Show, where we question the status quo on society's important issues while mixing in plenty of laughs along the way. Now here are your hosts, Mark Weaver and Rich Kroll.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Are We Idiots Show. We are your hosts, as mentioned, Mark Weaver and Richard Kroll. How are you, Richie?
I'm second this week.
You're back to second. Yeah, we gotta restore the hierarchy. And you were on vacation last week, Richie. How was that?
Great. I'll give a shout out to the big state of Texas. Took the family to San Antonio. Also did a day trip up through some rural towns to Austin, the capital of Texas. Had a great time, great weather, and now my daughter wants to go to school there.
Well, it's actually kind of appropriate that you brought up a city because we're going to be talking about two fine cities today. One's going to be a lot better than the other, but we'll get into that. We'll get there in a second. But it's a special episode because we have a guest in studio. Way down here from Boston. His name is George Muldoon. We kind of teased this last episode. But George, welcome to the Are We Idiots studio.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Rich. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. This is exactly what I envisioned as I listened to the prior 40-plus podcasts, this beautiful studio that rivals the Rogan Experience. So I'm
minus 30 million listeners.
Right, just that little tidbit.
So on our show today, we'll hear more from George in a few minutes. On our show today, as always, we have our Idiot of the Week, and George came armed with a nominee. He's actually got multiple nominees, but he's going to pick his best one. And then we had a listener submission. Tom Flynn submitted a nominee for us last week, so we're going to use that. And it's going to be George's nominee versus Tom's nominee for the Idiot of the Week, and Rich will decide. Then we're going to do the vaunted Philly versus Boston debate, and George has the weight of New England on him today, and I have the weight of 6 million people in the Philadelphia area on me. So it's going to be George and I debating Philly. What's better, Philly versus Boston? Rich is going to be quasi-moderator. I guess is that where we are?
Quasi or quasi?
Quasi.
Yeah, I'm going to be the moderator.
Quasimodo.
You look like Quasimodo sitting there hunched over. Yeah, I'm taking more of a middle ground, like I normally do, because I've spent a lot of time up in Boston. I am not anti-Boston, even as a Philly guy. I even like some famous Boston sports icons, which upsets a lot of local people. So I'm going to be taking an objective view and busting both your chops if anyone says anything egregiously stupid.
Middle of the road, Richie again. Never wants to take a stand. Never wants to stand for anything. He's like Jello. This guy.
He's Switzerland. I wasn't shocked to hear that when I saw this the show layout. So.
All right, then we're gonna hopefully, if we have time, we'll see how long the Philly versus Boston debate goes. We're gonna be talking about cities where you do not want to live, regardless. So we'll hopefully have time for that at the end. Sound good, guys? Sound like a good agenda?
Such a great agenda that you, of course, developed. It's always great.
Before we do that, though, I just want to remind our listeners we are in a new phase, and make sure you go out and share your favorite episode on iTunes. Go to our supporting listeners portion of our website, and on there's a link to our Patreon site, which is where you can support the show. And we actually have 4 new patrons this week, and we're hoping to have more each episode. But Rich, who are our new 4 patrons for this year, supporting the Are We Idiots show?
Yes, and as our first new 4 patrons, they're all going to get a box of Girl Scout cookies, and I'd like to honor them. No relation at all to us, just random folks globally that have come in to help us out.
Eric Weaver. Probably from Scotland.
Mostly from Scotland, and I would say Iceland. We have Eric Weaver, Chris Barbie, Scott Carney, otherwise known as Dog, and Mary Ellen Weaver Real Estate. No relation to Mark Weaver or Eric Weaver.
You actually used Mary Ellen Weaver Real Estate without even any leverage or anything. You just chose her out of the blue.
It was a bizarre coincidence.
But yeah, I have to. She's actually investing. Obviously, that's my wife, but she actually chose to invest in our show. So if you need someone for real estate, use her. She's
Great. She helped
very
us
good.
buy our house, and she's very nice.
So if you're in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, she's licensed there. Thank you, Mary Ellen, and thank you, Chris, Eric, and Dog. All right, so we're at the Idiot of the Week awards, and I'll let George go first. Who is your nominee, George?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Rich. So I was thinking about nominating Joel Embiid for some of the most absurd comments I've ever heard a professional athlete utter after a basketball game, given that he's beaten the Celtics maybe once out of the last 18,000 times. But at any rate...
He's starting already in the Idiots of the Week. We're not even in the right segment yet.
He's getting warmed up.
I am getting warmed up. I have a lot to share. I do want to preface everything I'm going to say later on today by acknowledging that I have a lot of love for Philly. I see Philadelphia as a almost like brother or sister city to Boston. We have a lot of similarities, but there are some differences, and we'll get into that. So anyhow, Embiid was saying he was the most unstoppable player in the NBA after finally beating the Celtics without Kyrie Irving and Marcus Smart, first time this year. And
Because Marcus Smart pushed him down. We don't want to mention that.
Yeah, we don't have to go into that. But, Marcus Smart is an agitator, which is part of why we love him. And if he played for the Sixers, you all would love him too, believe me. So anyhow, let me get on to my real idiot.
Okay.
So I'm going to go up to the Northwest in Oregon for this one. So Forest Grove, Oregon father has been accused of faking a burglary to cover up money that was stolen from his daughter's Girl Scout cookie sales.
Class A citizen.
Absolutely. Brian Kuchar, 40 years old. He's 40 years old, so you would think he'd be a little bit smarter. He actually pleaded not guilty, so again, these are alleged. They're not, it's not a conviction yet. So police said that on March 6th, Kuchar dialed 911 and reported that someone had gotten into his home through a sliding glass door, leading to a big struggle. When police arrived, Kuchar was unresponsive, and he was immediately taken to the hospital. The area then was essentially locked down, searched, taped up, but no suspect was located. Is
this Jesse Smollett Jr. or something?
Yeah. Actually, this may be even worse because the police actually issued like a K-9 unit. They taped off the entire neighborhood.
Oh, my.
They caused panic for all area residents. According to one of the neighbors, there were cops from all over, dogs, the forensic team. They had CSI tape up everywhere. We had to put sticks in all of our doors. I started setting the alarm during the day because I was afraid to be home by myself. At any rate, they investigated, and they realized there were some inconsistencies between what truly was being unconscious and unresponsive aligned with his story. And eventually, Mr. Kuchar admitted to the Forest Grove police investigators that he had staged the entire incident and he had stolen his daughter's Girl Scout cookie money himself, about $740 worth.
Oh, that's actually better, more than I thought. I thought you were going to say it was like $40.
Right? I mean, this is quite an elaborate scheme even for $740, but the other part of this is that the police are investigating now that the money was spent inappropriately.
Little Robert Kraft isms.
Little of that, little maybe narcotics.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah,
What
quite
is
a
his
scoundrel.
I'm curious as to what his daughter thinks about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, not a helicopter parent, doing all he can to pave the way for his daughter.
That's a lot of trouble to go through for some thin mint revenue. That's crazy.
My father used to charge me for lawnmower use, and I thought that was bad parenting. But it turns out it taught me business pretty well. But okay, that's a good nominee. Let me give you Tom Flynn's nominee. Man accidentally shot himself after he threw his gun at a cockroach.
That's pretty good, Tom.
An unnamed 50-year-old man told police in Detroit, Michigan, that he tried to kill the bug on Tuesday morning by throwing a shoe at it, only for a revolver hidden inside the shoe to fall out and go off, sending the bullet flying and hitting him in the foot.
He didn't notice the weight difference between a slipper and a gun-filled slipper?
Evidently not. But remember the guy we had one time who tried to kill a spider with a blowtorch and burned down his parents' house?
One of the greatest.
But that's the nominee from Flint. And by the way, Tom, thanks for sending it in. But yeah, guy tries to kill a cockroach with a shoe, gun falls out, shoots himself in the foot. They are your nominees, Richie. What do you think?
As always, it's a difficult task to choose and delineate between true deserving idiots. Hey, I've battled some big cockroaches in my day. They have thick outer coverings, and they're not easily stunned by a simple shoe or, sometimes even a baseball bat. So I could see a guy wanting to have a sturdier shoe with a gun, and then we all hear all sorts of crazy stories about guns being dislodged. And so that's a great one, but I'll tell you right now, to be a true idiot, you have to, there's layers to George's story. It's one thing to stage your own abduction or mugging like Jesse Smollett, but when it involves covering up stealing $740 of your daughter's Girl Scout money that's going to charity, that is so bad. It's idiotic and egregious. I'm going to give it to our good friend up in Northwest Oregon.
Mr. Kuchar.
Mr. Kuchar, no less.
The only thing would have made it worse is if
$1?
it was like a GoFundMe for his daughter's cancer treatments or something. Can you imagine?
That's even worse. But Tom Flynn, great remote addition to the Idiot of the Week nomination. It was very close.
All right. So are you going to send $1 to the Girl Scouts of Northwest America?
George is a guest. We're each going to send $1, one to the father, one to the daughter. Hopefully, start replacing that lost funding.
Okay, good. So now we're going to move on to the main subject of this wonderful show today, and we're going to debate what city is better, Philly or Boston. And before we go into it, why don't George and Rich, why don't you tell the listeners how this came about?
I'll start, and George can kick in. So George and I have worked at a couple companies together. We're both very avid sports fans. And over the last 2 decades, Philly and Boston obviously very heated in cross or interdivisional rivalries. There's been a ton of stories, Philly versus Boston, Boston versus Philly, just Philly and Boston in general. And, we'd go back and forth, busting each other's chops like he just did with Embiid. But then he found out, I have a Bobby Orr jersey, I have a Larry Bird jersey, so I'm not your typical completely 100% biased Philly fan.
Well, I have a picture of you with a Brady jersey on, too, that I framed and put on my man cave wall.
Next, I'll find out you wore a Dallas Cowboy jersey. That would be awful.
I've never gone that far. I wore the Brady jersey because I had a big wager on the Patriots winning the Super Bowl that year. And as part of the wager, I had to wear the jersey. And I actually gladly did it. But the point is, we've gone back and forth, heated debates, fun-filled debates, and it just wouldn't let up. So then I started thinking, well, wait a minute. There's more to, obviously, a city than sports. What about restaurants? What about history? What about population, quality of life, location-wise, all the things that go into rating a city? And we started talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And originally it was Philly versus Boston sports, which I was really excited about because other than
for obvious reasons.
Yeah, other than a Brandon Graham strip sack, this would have been a real bloody affair.
He's starting already. Man.
Yeah,
not even into it yet. We didn't even let him go yet.
Yeah, and I listen. Kudos to the Eagles. I'm actually the only one of the three of us who witnessed the Eagles win their first Super Bowl.
This is
I'm
true.
proud to say.
Okay.
So there you go for Philly fans. I see I'm not all Boston. I can say that.
So over the years, when you and Rich are going back, what does it usually consist of? Like text group or busting each other over the phone? What was it? Just is that what went on for years and years over a text group, or what was it?
Yes.
Text
absolutely.
group. Our buddy Rick Linares in Long Island is kind of the middle mediator between Boston and Philly, and he would egg us on, and it just escalated from there.
Okay, Good. So here's what we're going to do. And we're not Oxford-style debaters. We're not professionals. But I'm going to take Philly, and George is going to take Boston. And we're going to put our best case forward. Rich is going to be the moderator and, of course, not taking a stance one way or the other like he's accustomed to. But we're going to let George go first, and he's going to make his case for Boston. And this is not timed per se. Rich, you're going to try to keep it about equal. But George is going to make his case for Boston. Then I'll make my case for Philly. And then Rich will editorialize, and who knows, maybe we'll be jumping all over one another. And then we'll have rebuttal time, and then we'll get a closing summary case to make.
How long would you like the opening premise to last?
That was what I was going to ask.
Yeah, 5 minutes max. Ooh. 5 minutes max.
Okay.
All right, let's go, George.
All right.
Lay it on us. Let's go. And by the way, let's just say this, right? George already mentioned it. They're both very similar cities. They have a steep history, very historic cities. They both are known for education and healthcare, and they have a lot of cultural similarities. Absolutely. And they're in the most heavily populated area of the country. So they are very similar, and that's why it's good to compare. And, of course, at the end of this, we'll find out that Philly is the best.
Okay, so yeah, to just concur with the first part of that, I do think our cities identify with each other, our greater regions identify with each other. What we hold as important is definitely similar. The blue-collar, hardworking, bare knuckles, never say die attitude towards, the passion we have for our teams, to just everything we do. But yeah, there certainly are some differences. I mean, I would say that Philly, outside of Boston, would be my number 2. So that I'm really looking forward to later on we talk about the worst cities in the world, because we're going to have a lot of fun with that too. I've got some opinions there.
All right, so why Boston?
So why
George?
Boston?
Put your best case forward.
So, all right, I got about 5 minutes, so I'll give my best case, or at least facsimile thereof. So the first thing to remember, and this really is the most important reason, is there would be no Philly without Boston. Okay?
Good
Let's just
start.
remember that.
Yeah.
There would actually be no United States of America without Boston. Boston was actually founded 52 years earlier than Philadelphia in 1630 versus 1682. Now, that was under British rule, but then the first shots were fired. Where? Up in the Boston area, Lexington and Concord. There were multitudes of battles up in Boston, and although Philly was the first U.S. capital, you can thank Boston for enabling that to happen. Great early American political figures, fighters, leaders, Paul Revere, you got John Adams, John Quincy Adams, Sam Adams, which led to a beautiful array of
Are they all related by any chance?
I'm sure they are somehow.
They probably intermarried up there in Boston.
They still do.
Listen, there would be no John Hancock signature without John Hancock, who was from Boston. In addition to Henry Cabot Lodge, Susan B. Anthony. So without Susan B. Anthony, without her upbringing in Boston, who knows? Maybe women wouldn't be voting today.
We'd have no silver dollars either.
Yeah, you'd have.
They
none
were
of
really
those.
a hit, weren't they?
And then the Fort Knox, which is here in Pennsylvania, it's named after Henry Knox.
Fort Knox is not in Pennsylvania.
Oh, wherever it is, it's around here somewhere.
It's in
Delaware,
Kentucky.
Yeah. So that's
Or
kind of
Tennessee.
greater Pennsylvania.
Pennsyltucky.
So you could ding me on that, but Henry Knox is the point. He's from Boston. Even the great Benjamin Franklin,
Whoa.
the king of early Philadelphia, and some unsavory things about his character that I also read that I'll keep out of this discussion. Is
He invented
from Boston.
half the things that we use today. And by the way, he chose to live in Philadelphia after he was born in Boston. What does that tell you?
I don't know, but he's no Johnny Appleseed, I'll tell you that, who was from Boston. Then we also brought to the world the Kennedys, for better or for worse, starting with Joe, Rose, JFK, RFK, and Teddy.
That's
which
meant to
maybe
help
you can-
your case?
I'm just going to say you can maybe take or
Did you
leave
see
that.
Ken Burns' Vietnam documentary? You might not want to tout the Kennedys too much.
Yeah, well, they're from Boston. They had a big impact on the world, as was George H.W. Bush, Richard Clark, who was the head of the National Security Council and anti-terrorism leader after 9/11. And we need more Richard Clarks, I'd say, today, who was able to succeed both on the right and the left administrations between both Bushes, and the Clinton presidency. Michael Bloomberg, you're welcome, New York City. Sean Spicer, the first Trump administration press secretary,
Yeah,
Take it or
okay,
leave it. I mean,
okay,
think about
I think I
the-
just won the debate when he
No.
brought up Sean Spicer.
You may
Is
not
this
have to
allowed?
talk.
Is he allowed to interrupt my opening salvo
As
here?
long as it's quick.
Okay. I mean, I was going to say who was too strong a character for the job. He doesn't take the lumps as well as he should have. And he also was the reason why there were endless SNL laughs for Melissa McCarthy.
That
so
I'll
we
give
have
you.
to thank him for that, and he's from Boston. The first American in space was from Boston. That was Alan Shepard, and then Kristen McAuliffe, first teacher in space. But, unfortunately, the victim of the Challenger, she was from the Boston area. Many literary geniuses were born in Boston. Edgar Allan Poe, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Nathaniel Hawthorne. More recently, J.D. Salinger, Stephen King, who you'll see at many Red Sox games, home and away, E.E. Cummings, John Irving, if you ever read The World According to Garp.
Mark doesn't read much, so he has no idea.
Looking around here, and I think he's quite cultured. I'm sure he reads quite...
Am
you've
I
read the Da Vinci
going to be able
Code,
to
right?
list everyone who's ever born in Philadelphia? Is that what this is about?
I'm
He's
just
got
saying,
5 minutes.
this is it.
He's 2 minutes into it.
This
No,
was
more
part
than
of
that.
it. Now, why do people want to live in Boston? The geography of Boston, the climate of Boston. You can argue it's really snowy, but a lot of people who like snow. We get the best of all four seasons. There's beaches, there's coasts. We don't just have the Delaware Valley. We don't have these little rivers. We get this big thing called the Atlantic Ocean. Mountains, flatlands, wonderful golf. Our air quality is actually better than Philadelphia. Boston is one of the top healthiest cities in America, and in fact, the world.
I saw a lot of fat people when I was up there.
Well, you're going to find
If
them
you
everywhere.
consider a lot of beer drinking healthy, I guess.
Well, we're number one in the polls that weren't written from Bay Area writers who always say that San Francisco is the most healthiest city, and believe me, I've been there a lot.
thought it was Denver.
In my opinion, not the most.
No, they smoke the most weed in Denver.
By the way, weed is legal in Massachusetts. It's not legal here. No, I'm not one to partake, but that could be argued from a big part of the population as an advantage. We have lower taxes, but we also have a higher cost of living. You know why? Because it's worth it.
Oh, here we go.
Our poverty rate is lower, 21% to 26%. We have half the unemployment of Philadelphia, 6% to 3%. Philadelphia, unfortunately, has been labeled the poorest major city in the U.S., according to Pew Research, which leads to more crime in Philly. The homicide rate is 3x of Boston. So therefore, Boston's actually a safer place. There were 333 homicides in Philly last year, only 58 in Boston. Now I know greater Philadelphia and the population is 3x the size of Boston.
Yeah.
So it's the rate that matters. We also have...
You also
again,
still have an
both
Irish
cities-
mob, and our Italian mob is not as prevalent.
Oh,
as it
you're
used to be.
taking my. You're taking my.
But Whitey's out of the picture now, so it's kind of underground. But education, 45% of folks in Boston have college degrees. I'm not sure how valuable that is nowadays, but versus 31% in Philadelphia. And again, the Philly metro area is 3 times the geographical side of Boston, but yet there are 35 top colleges and universities in Boston versus about 18 here in Philadelphia.
Does he get to ramble on for 25 minutes? Here?
One
Is that-
more minute,
Oh, my
George.
goodness.
One more minute.
I'm
That's
going to
fine.
fire the moderator.
Listen, the celebrities, we could talk about the Wahlbergs, Afflecks, the Damons of the world, but what's more interesting is shows like The Office would never have happened. You'd have no Jim, you'd have no Mindy Collins and John Krasinski. You would never have had Friends, Matthew Perry and Matt LeBlanc. You'd have no Order, only Law, because Sam Waterston is from Boston, okay?
I did like the show Cheers.
How about all those 80s movies that you all probably grew up with and loved? Anthony Michael Hall, without him, they wouldn't have happened. He's from Boston. Stifler's mom is from Boston. I'm not sure if you knew that. Can you imagine American
That
Pie
helps.
without Stifler's
that
mom?
helps the rating.
And the OJ trial would have never been the same because F. Lee Bailey, who had the first idea for, if it doesn't fit the glove, you should acquit. He's from Boston. Some of the best restaurants you'll find in Boston, the best celebrity chefs come from Boston, from Todd English to Ming Tsai to Jasper White, and even Emeril, who many people think is from New Orleans. He's from Boston. The great Jack Buck, Sean McDonough, my friend Bill Simmons, George Stephanopoulos, Ben Bradley, Leslie Stahl, and Barbara Walters. The whole media landscape has been influenced by people from Boston. Music, from Aerosmith to Belle Biv DeVoe. I'm not going to mention the New Kids on the Block because, they had a lot of hits.
30 seconds.
Bobby Brown, And then the sports side of things. I mean, I don't even want to bring it up, but if
You have to.
count
It's
the
your best
titles,
case.
if you count the titles, which is, that's the scoreboard, the Sox have 9, the Phillies have 2. The Bees have 6, the Flyers have 2. The Celtics have 17. By the way, the Celtics have won 24% of all NBA championships. And to Joel Embiid, if you're listening, the Sixers have 3. The Pats have 6, which you can see on my beautiful T-shirt here. 6X Super Bowl champions. They've also been to a record 11 Super Bowls. Now, the Eagles have 4 championships, one being a Super Bowl. I'll still give you 4 championships. But you were founded in 1933 versus the Patriots 1960. We're 1-1 in Super Bowls, and the Philly special, all those jokes and stuff about Brady not catching that pass have nothing on good Donovan McNabb jokes about him throwing up in his helmet before the fourth quarter. So Boston is the best. Philly is a close second, and you just got to remember, there really would be no Philly without Boston, which kind of trumps, I think, everything.
All right,
Your 30
thank you.
seconds was like four minutes more.
Yeah, he did fly in from Boston. I was trying to give him some extra time.
All right, well, he's going to have more time. All right, so here's my case. Prepared to be blown away.
Oh, boy.
I'm going to start with, because I live and breathe this Philadelphia freedom. From the day that I was born, I've waved the flag. Philadelphia freedom took me knee-high to a man. Give me a piece of mama daddy never had.
Yeah, I'm getting excited now.
All right, so historical significance. While I do admire the Tea Party and the rebellion versus a tyrannical government, you knew I had to do that as a libertarian.
I
Rich.
expected it.
There is absolutely no comparison because the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the two most foundational documents to who we are as a people, our system of government, our freedoms, they were both signed in Philadelphia. So
Good points.
There's
That is a
no
good
one.
point.
There's no one who can even argue that. We have the Liberty Bell, the Independence Hall, the Constitution Center, Valley Forge Battlefield, and I know New England has lots of battlefields as well. Critical to George Washington's rise. George already mentioned we were one of the only 3 since the signing of the Constitution to be the nation's capital. The first hospital, the first library, the first medical school, the first business school, Wharton. The first
Who went there? Who went to Wharton?
stock exchange, the zoo. As most people know, Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn. William Penn was a Quaker. Therefore, he liked the Greek word Philadelphia, and that stands for brotherly love. And that's, as a libertarian, you got to love the tenet of tolerance. And Philadelphia is a very tolerant. They're not a snobby bunch like some people.
Boy, is that a bunch of, stinking pile of
All right,
poo-poo.
That's historical. So present day, it's the 8th largest metropolitan area. Boston's 10th. Obviously, with the larger opportunities that come with that, our GDP is 445 billion versus 363 billion. So again, more opportunity for more people. This is key. We are centrally located to the 2 most powerful cities in the country, New York and D.C. We're closer to New York than Boston is. We're much closer to D.C. We're strategically
I
placed
don't know
in
if that's something
between
you should
there.
brag about.
That
being close
is.
to
That's
DC.
where the power center is. You can jump on 1-hour ride to Newark Airport and fly to anywhere in the world. You got at least a 4-hour drive to do that.
Yeah, but we fly in Boston to D.C. We don't have to drive.
We have a moderate climate, much better climate. We have less rain and snow, more sunny days, longer and warmer outdoor season for all kinds of activities. Yeah, you can go skiing and ice hockey, that you can have that. Proximity to wide, beautiful sand beaches, not rocks in the harbor. The
true.
New England beaches are the worst.
This is true. I've been
I've
to
got
Cape Cod many
pictures.
times.
We're
I'm
much
gonna
more
have to pull your rank on that one later, but go ahead.
We're much more affordable than Boston, so you get a lot more for your money here. Traffic is much worse in Boston, not even mentioned in the Big Dig fiasco.
That's a fiasco.
It's actually a badge of honor.
Forbes actually ranked Boston number 1 worst. Philly was 9, and other surveys that had it 6 and Philly 14. But either way, it's lost time. Superior food scene, top-rated restaurants. There's over 200 BYOBs in Philly. Food and Wine magazine rated Philly number 6 out of the top 32. Boston was not on the list for good food and beverage.
I don't know what list you were looking at, but That's insane.
I still have my minutes. Okay. The elephant in the room. Philly is a tough image.
You're not talking about me, are you?
No, the elephant in the studio. Boston, let's face it, you have a little bit of an arrogance about you. You've heard that before, George. We know that.
Is it the accent?
The wicked smart thing, all that stuff. We don't go by that. And by the way,
Nobody talks like that there.
the people that went to Harvard and MIT, they didn't come from Boston. They came from all over the world. You mentioned movie stars. Matt Damon is probably your biggest star, right? He's nothing compared to Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper is way above Matt Damon at this point. He's a has-been.
I think he's cuter, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the girls all think that. Boston-based movies, Spotlight, Good Will Hunting, The Town, there's a bunch of them. No comparison to Rocky. Rocky's one of the best movies of all time. It's on the best films all time. Philadelphia Story, Philadelphia, Witness, too many good movies. Your famous gangster.
M. Night Shyamalan.
Right. Your famous gangster, Whitey Bulger, was a turncoat. He dimed on people, and then he went and hid like a big wussy. And yes, I will give you that Boston professional sports are superior to us right now. I'm a huge fan, but I cannot argue and be credible that our professional sports are the same. But what do you have in college sports? You got the bean pot thing or whatever you do with that stupid hockey game. You guys
smoke bean pot?
Whatever. It's some hockey game between BU and Boston College every year. They think it's the greatest thing in the world. Like we have 2 of the last 3 national championships 5 minutes from here in college sports. So,
yeah.
And here's where my clincher is. And you notice I kept it right to 5 minutes. This is my clincher. I'm going to make all Philadelphians proud.
On my scorecard, that's going to be a helpful addition to your score.
Here it is. Boston does not have Wawa.
Wow.
I rest my case.
He just threw the mic down, folks.
Yeah, just throw it down. But my goodness.
So, Richie, let's hear your summary of our 2 opening statements.
I don't think I went over 5 minutes, did I?
Yeah, you did.
You're way over.
A little bit.
Way over.
Great. I appreciate the research and the homework that was done by both of you. I learned a couple new things about both cities. Very powerful arguments. I think, Mark, yours sounded a little more powerful because you raised your voice. George tried to
passion.
Keep his composure.
Us Philly guys have passion. Boston, yeah, they're kind of like relaxed.
We've been there. We've done that.
So I would say, for me personally, for right now, it's pretty equal. I would say it's tied after round 1.
All right, George, do you want to pick apart my Philly piece? I'll give you a rebuttal time. It's going to be like 2 or 3 minutes. We have to keep moving.
I may not even listen. I'll give you some time back because I went over my opening statement. I will say this. So, Mark, you are an amazing orator. You have a way with words. You are the one who've created this podcast with Rich. So you clearly have the gift of gab better than I do. But it's equivalent to Don Lemon and Rachel Maddow, who are wonderful speakers, trying to still sell to the American people that Trump colluded with the Putin government and he's a puppet and it's really Russian controlling. As convincing as it sounds, when you open up the kimono and peel back the layers of the onion, some of your facts just don't stick.
And which would that be?
So
any
many
particular
of them,
ones?
Yeah,
any particular ones that gall you?
Well, let's start with some of the geography stuff. Our beaches are not just rocky. If you've been to anywhere else other than Cape Cod, you start going anywhere from Boston north. In fact, I actually own a beach home, and it is the largest sandy beach in New England.
Yeah, in New England.
And it goes for 4 miles long.
That's like saying I have the highest quality car in Russia.
You could actually play a
tallest midget in the circus.
The tide from the soft sand out to the low tide, you could actually fit a football field and a half. So there are plenty of sandy, beautiful beaches. You are right that there's more sun in Philadelphia. That's why it's always sunny in Philadelphia, which is a wonderful show that's filmed in Los Angeles.
So just to interrupt a little bit, so those 4 days a year you get to go to the beach in New England with the weather?
You're interrupting too much.
Oh, boy.
It's more than that. And we actually have beach. So that's a beautiful thing. The Jersey Shore, do you really want to call that Phillies?
It's an hour away.
Because you also
from Philly,
have to
it's less than an hour.
All the characters
I gotta
in the Jersey Shore along with that.
I'm going to intervene right here. Both shores are an hour to 2 hours away from the center city, Boston or Philly. So
Exactly.
it's equal.
Exactly.
Not 2 hours. 30 minutes north of
Stop
Boston.
it.
You could be in Newburyport in 30 minutes.
You could be in Atlantic City
Google
in
it.
45 minutes from Philly.
It's about the same.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I beg to differ with that. Now, you also brought up film, character, like the Rocky thing.
Oh, Rocky,
If I
come
hear
on.
Rocky one more time, I'll tell you, I went to the Super Bowl.
America Film Institute had it rated in the top 10 of
You're
all
going to get
time.
docked.
It's
You're
great.
interrupting.
It's great. But I went to the Super Bowl, and the nonstop Rocky music was beautiful. It was beautiful at the beginning. But then when it just kept going and going and going and going, it's like, all right, enough already. And then we know how to spell Eagles very, very well. Walking through the Mall of America, people screaming in my face, E-A-G-L-E-S. Eagles.
Best fight song, though. I mean, come
my
on,
God.
you got to
Listen,
give
We've got fight songs too. We go PATS, 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 which the Jets fans actually stole. We were doing that in the 70s. But we don't do that. And maybe that's because we've won so much in the last 20 years. We've had 12 championships since 2001. I mean, I have 15-year-old twin boys who know nothing but, are the Patriots in the Super Bowl this year? Or if they're not, then it was a failure.
Did you teach them about Spygate and Deflategate and Robert Kraft's happy endings, too?
Phony, still an alleged...
You made me go there, man. You made
Yeah.
me go there.
I can make you go there, but everybody anybody knows that Spygate is something that every team in the NFL does. The Patriots got dinged on that because of a certain angle they were doing it from the stands. Deflategate is a complete bunch of nonsense. You tell me that a 68-year-old man can take 15 footballs into a John and within 90 seconds very precisely remove, 1 to 2 psi of air, or maybe it's because it was cold and rainy at Foxborough that night. And it doesn't matter because Brady, following that, won the Super Bowl.
1 minute.
1 minute. That was 4 or 5 minutes.
He flew in from Boston.
Yeah. So anyhow,
I'm getting outranked
I don't
here.
think you can underestimate. And the thing about like the Philly fans are more tolerant is.
No, I
just
said
that they-
Philadelphia was based on the city of Tom. I admit,
mean,
there's
coming,
an edge.
Coming from
There's an edge.
a city where the stadiums had the first jails. I mean, I don't
That's a
think
good
that
point.
reeks of tolerance. So I'll give my rest of my time back since I went over my opening statement.
It was founded on tolerance. I admit there are some rough edges in the Philadelphia sports fans.
Yep.
But so even Kurt Schilling, by the way, when he went to Boston, he got corrupted. Now he's a crazy person. He actually defrauded a bunch of investors, and I think he's a total kook.
We don't claim him to be our own, although
Didn't he help you win a World Series?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Kurt.
All right. So my point, my pushback on Boston is that, I think most people would agree that Boston is snobby. And I didn't hear you retort to that. But there's people in Boston, a lot of people in Boston. It's the reason you get a reputation, just like Philly has a tough reputation. You get a reputation for a reason.
Is that perceived though?
No, I think it's real because stereotypes start from something. I think all stereotypes start from some basis of repetitive action. So I want to hear your response to that. You've obviously heard that before. Why is it that people from Boston think they're better than everyone else?
I'm going to interject after George's comment because I have a strong comment about both. Go ahead, George.
I don't think that people from Boston think they're better than everybody else. I think that people from Boston are just very proud, very much like Philadelphia people, of where they're from.
But we don't have that
proud
reputation of being
people.
We don't have the reputation of being snobby, though.
Not necessarily snobby, but completely overzealous. Yes, over the top. Look at what happened just the last couple of days in Washington when Bryce Harper went, back to D.C. You had a whole group of Philly fans just antagonizing the entire city, from what I heard, antagonizing the ballpark. I mean, I witnessed it personally at both Super Bowls that the Patriots and Eagles were a part of. Just in your face, people walking around with full mohawks and name on back of jersey, killer. I mean, that's what you get when you're going to a Philly sporting event.
I do prefer a mullet over a mohawk, but let me interject here because I've spent a lot of time in both cities and both suburbs of both cities. And look, Philly blue-collar maniac fans can be as jerky as anybody, but so can the massholes from Boston. So
Southies.
Hey, we all have our unsavory characters.
I think there's three components of Boston, Philadelphia, and accompanying suburbs. You both have their blue-collar tough segment. Then you have your educated, passionate segment. But I'll tell you, both cities are snobby in the suburbs. So,
Especially that Newtown Square area. That's
now
really
the main
snobby.
line of Philly, which I've lived close to my whole life, is some of the snobbiest, self-entitled, inherit daddy's money, look down on people areas in the country. But
Mommy and
so
daddy's
is-
money, by the way.
Mommy and daddy's money, but so is the Wellesley area and some of the want to associate yourself with Harvard and all that stuff. So I think there's almost identical attitudes, snobbery in the right areas, toughness, and just egregious behavior.
I'd agree with that.
All
I
right,
think
so I'm going to give you, George, the closing summary of.
You don't have any more rebuttals? I'm giving you another minute.
No, we've got to move on. We're running a little bit over. So I'll give you, George, the closing summary, and then I'll read mine, and then Rich will render a verdict.
Well, look, like I said in the beginning, a lot of what even made Philly possible started in Boston. A lot of the great people and athletes that have even been good in Philly either came from or were schooled in Boston. Dr. J being one of them. The scoreboard is too easy to go after, but I think what people don't like in Boston is, when you hear like the Joel Embiid type comments. And even after the Super Bowl, when I was there in Super Bowl 52, and I watched the Eagles win that game, and then I watched you all this year just let go of the right quarterback. I want to be on the record by saying that was a mistake. You should have kept Nick Foles. You should have traded Wentz. The guy is just incredible what he does. I think that was a giant mistake, and it was going to cost Philly long term. But when you have that kind of outrageous, like in-your-face, confrontational attitude, which I see from the sports fan base here, and you respond in kind of like, hey, win something before, you start spitting in my face like Bill Cowher. I need like a shield sometimes, talk to these people. Then the reaction on their side, look at those arrogant pricks, So I think that's where some of maybe that comes from.
Duly noted.
I will just wrap by saying, there would be no Philly without Boston.
You've said that 8 times now.
It's the most important
Eventually,
point.
we'll actually agree with you, maybe.
It's the most important point. I mean, talking about the Capitol and the Declaration of Independence being signed here and the Constitution, look, what was happening, the declaration of war and the treaties that were signed maybe in D.C. and other places better than or more important than the soldiers at the beaches of Normandy on D-Day? No.
He's going down the emotional.
Look.
There'd be no Boston without England. That doesn't make any sense.
No, that's a poor analogy, actually. But the governing body versus, you want to talk about a blue collar city, like the people who are doing the majority of the fighting. That's what we're talking about. But anyhow, thank you for having me here. I think either way, we both have awesome cities, and that again, Boston is the premier of the two, but Philadelphia is a close 1A, and I love this place. And really appreciate you guys having me on.
Great to have you, but here comes Mark's rebuttal and then my overall summary.
It'll be quick, though, because I've already restated it, but just to kind of encapsulate. So we had this debate today to determine livability, right? And if you add up that, let's face it, the pro sports goes to Boston. But if you add up the fact that the cultural attractions and the education, the healthcare are about similar, so that's a big livability thing. Then you combine climate, right? Climate is huge, and
Absolutely.
we've already mentioned that we have more sun, less rain, less snow, warmer weather, longer outdoor season,
Dirtier air.
better beach season, right? So that's all good. We are the founders of our country. The founding principles of the country were formed here. Declaration of Independence and Constitution. You cannot compare to those foundational documents. We have better traffic. We have more free time. We have quicker access to beaches, better food, better access to New York and D.C., flights around the world. We have Wawa. We do not have owner of a football franchise
Oh,
going
here
to
we
a
go.
strip mall when he's a billionaire to get a happy ending. We do it the old-fashioned way. We have our owner cheat on his wife with someone in the Eagles office and then marry the younger wife. That's the way you're supposed to do it if you're a billionaire, right,
That's a
Rich?
great point. Great
So,
point.
Richie, I turn it over to you because we got to move on.
You got some mileage out of Kraft, I'll tell you.
How much time do I have for this closing?
About 4 or 5 minutes.
All right, so folks, wow, really, really tremendous debate. You would both get your butts kicked in any college debate environment.
Of course.
You're smart guys, but you're clueless in a lot of things you said. Let me summarize it this way. I took a lot of notes. I paid a lot of attention.
It's the most prep he's ever done, by the way, listeners.
That hurts. Mark thinks he's so smart because he graduated from Wharton, which isn't that hard, by the way. So I'm going to go through a couple major categories that I took from your conversations that are important. Let's start with Philly and Boston first. You both rattled off a bunch of good ones. Some you missed, though, right? So Philly is the first volunteer fire department, first University of Penn, but Boston has the first college, Harvard. Folks, look up the difference between a university and college. Philadelphia had the first flag, the first public water system, the first computer for all of you geeks, ENIAC, developed out of UPenn, but Boston had the first public smoking ban, which I love. That was even in the 1600s. The first newspaper, the first post office, even the first UFO sighting in 1639. So I'm going to give it a tie as far as Philly versus
How could I have
Boston.
predicted?
First.
How
Well,
could I have predicted?
that's for that category. Next category.
Categories.
Restaurants and nightlife. Okay. Philly blows away Boston. I looked at different ratings in the Zagat's top 100.
I got to take you out next time you come up.
Philly had 4. Boston only had 1.
Right.
And as far as 5-star restaurants, the irony, which people don't realize, Philly has more 5-star restaurants per capita than any city in the country, including New York, San Francisco, etc. So a nod to restaurants in Philadelphia. Now, weather. Let's face it, guys, both suck. And I don't know how anybody could say Philadelphia had less precipitation.
It is.
We just beat Seattle this past year.
No, they
Well,
have the
that's
same
1
amount of
year.
Actually, that was a fact you got wrong. There is identical precipitation. We get more snow.
Here's the deal. It's a
I just
tie.
looked it up.
Both places suck. Even in the summer when we get more sunlight, it can be 100 degrees and humid. I hate the weather in both cities. That's a tie. Location.
More sunny days in Philly. That is not disputable.
Yep, that's true.
As far as location, I think they're both great locations, and as mentioned, a lot of similarities. They're both on rivers. You both have boathouse rows. You have great center cities, great suburbs. They're both great college towns. They're both great sports towns. You're close to mountains for skiing in both. You're close to the ocean at both. You're close to other major cities at both. We are closer to New York and D.C., if that matters to anybody.
Yeah, but if you love your town so much, why do you care about going to New York and D.C. so much?
Because-
Like, that's the thing. In Boston, we don't want to go to New York unless we have
That's
to.
what makes you less cultured because you're so limited in what you see. You got to
We have all the culture we need.
Now,
right
Very
here.
insular.
So I would say location-wise and the demographics and the makeup of the cities, very similar. I'm going to call it a tie. Now,
See,
You know where this is going,
there's no
don't you,
need
George?
to escape Boston like there is Philadelphia on occasion.
famous people.
Oh,
Famous
no.
people.
George already listed everyone who was ever born in New
Well,
England.
you know,
It's
we have,
important.
we have Ben Franklin, William Penn, Betsy Ross. He mentioned all the Adams brothers that took over the country. As far as famous people, I looked at them closely. Even if you add in celebrities, music, sports, it's all about the same. So that's also, in my opinion, even. Now, hands down, Boston's got us beat us, has beat us in sports. Right, even if you look at different eras, and I'm not going to go before 1970 because a bunch of fat white guys winning basketball games or baseball or basketball games without African American involvement doesn't count to me. I don't care what they did before 1970, but even so, you still have 19 championships versus 7. If I add in Nova's 3 NCAA hoop championships, it's still 19-10. All right, Boston won that, but Philly's much bigger. And as we know, bigger is always better in almost every category in life, including some of the most important categories,
Except for debt.
Unemployment,
except for those.
poor air
But
quality.
Philly, it's more diverse. It's more passionate. It's bigger. If we did go to
More
war,
diverse.
if we did go
Definitely
to war,
more diverse.
Philly would kick Boston's butt. It's just more of a war town. So that evens out the sports, and now it comes down to my tiebreaker. I have Philly and Boston going into the bottom of the ninth tied. And here's what did it for me. Philly was the first city to introduce Girl Scout cookies.
Oh,
It's
that's
a Girl
tough.
Scout cookie theme today.
Yeah,
We're giving
it
them out
really
to our
is.
patrons. George is an idiot of the week, and now the tiebreaker.
So listen, I love Boston. I love Philly. I think George hit the nail on the head. They're brother, sister cities. There's so many similarities, and they stack up against each other in so many ways. But at the end of the day, cracking open a box of Girl Scout cookies under an extra sunny day that Boston doesn't have gives it the nod.
Listen, the fix was in from the get-go, but I do appreciate. I mean, when you say
You're in
with a
enemy
straight
territory.
face that the sports is a tie because of Villanova.
No, I said you won the sports.
I think you kind of added something on there.
Is his headphones working?
Yeah, the number of
George
championships
has
was wrong.
Selective
So-
listening.
All right, folks, we gotta
past
move on,
19.
but and we gotta move quickly. So I'll just rip through these. These are 4 cities in the world we don't want to live in. By the way,
Not just the U.S.
All right.
Not,
now
well,
let's-
there's 3 outside the U.S. and then 1 in the U.S. that I'll highlight. But again, we got to move pretty quickly. So, Los Cabos, New Mexico. I actually had that on my bucket list to go to many years ago because it's right there in the Gulf of Cortez and deep sea fishing and beautiful golf, 5-star hotels. That's the way it was once known. Now its murder rate has skyrocketed 500%, and it's for cities over 300,000 people, it's deemed the murder capital of the world in 2018.
No need to golf there.
No.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Caracas, Venezuela. This one hits home because my son-in-law's Venezuelan. The second highest murder rate in the world. It's estimated, listen to this, guys. It's estimated that 98% of all crimes in Caracas go unsolved.
Listen,
That's a great police force.
I would rather streak through the streets of South Philadelphia with a MAGA hat on than
And
have
a
to live
Patriots jersey
and
on.
a Patriots jersey on rather than live a month in Caracas these days.
Nairobi, Kenya. In addition to a high murder rate, Nairobi has pervasive voter fraud and nullifications in their elections, where widespread voter intimidation is also the norm. The greater Nairobi area also struggles from deforestation, soil erosion, water shortages, degraded water quality, flooding, poaching, and domestic and industrial pollution.
Cancel my family safari.
Other than that, it's a beautiful place.
Beautiful place.
And lastly, Flint, Michigan. Well, we'll bring it home to the U.S. Flint, Michigan, and they were, of course, in the news a lot over the last couple of years with their water quality problems. But it doesn't
Tragic.
Doesn't also get much better outside of that. It's one of the poorest and most dangerous cities in the U.S. About half of all households in Flint earn less than $26,000 a year.
They're working at Wawa.
41% of the population lives below the poverty line. There's almost 2,000 violent crimes for every 100,000 people, and more than 90% of U.S. cities. Here's the key: median home price. See if you guys. I'll give you a guess. What do you think the median home price in Flint, Michigan is? George, you go first.
The price is right.
Yeah, I'd say about $39,000.
I'd say 13,000.
You're about in the middle of that. $28,000 is the median home price.
You win, I went over.
So there are some places, we were talking a lot today about Philly and Boston, 2 great cities. I will admit they're 2 great cities and historic cities. Philly just happens to be a little bit better. But George will have to walk away with that in his mind. But any final comments, guys? We don't want to live in those 4 cities, but any final comments as we close up the episode?
I will say this: if and when Philadelphia ever wins another championship, please refrain from eating the horse poop.
That's a very great safety tip. That was going to be my show opening safety tip. Folks, we have a lot more sunny days in Philly, and they're starting today. Make sure you put on your sunscreen.
There's so many sunny days. They actually had a show that has references that, right? It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Did you get
Awesome
that one?
show.
That was
Okay,
great.
awesome
You're
show.
so funny.
That's what I'm known for, my
I have
humor.
nothing negative to say about that show.
All right, folks, make sure you plan to listen next show. We talk about the rising posture of victimhood. I think I've said on this show before, Richie, there's almost nothing worse you can do to someone is to convince them that they're a victim. Yet that seems to be pervasive in our society. We'll talk about how that's filtering through our culture and the damage that it can do. And we'll do that next episode. As always, please remember, if what you see or hear sounds idiotic, then we're just the guys to help you sort it out. See y'all next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening. Please download, subscribe, share, and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and also our website.